Today, we have an episode that's more of a girl-to-girl, heart-to-heart, human-to-human chat, very similar to the episode that I did with my friend Krista Williams that you guys loved at the top of the season. This episode is with Llewellyn, who is a fellow founder in the health and wellness world and who is very much known for her massive weight loss and health transformation. A few years back, she lost, I think, 90 or 100 pounds and didn't do it the starvation way, but did it the lifting way and got super strong and is still an avid weightlifter and fitness gal to this day, who you can tell is just so married to the craft and the love of it and really has this positive relationship with exercise, which is so cool to watch. And it's been amazing to watch her maintain these changes and build a business and kind of turn her life around. I thought it was such a fun conversation because as I kind of started to research her to understand her story and the inner workings of her mind and how someone goes from being in a place of feeling totally lost and out of control in their body and rock bottom with their health, both physically and mentally, and how that kind of a person experiences key mindset shifts or, come to Jesus moments where they somehow dig deep within themselves and find the will to completely turn their lives around and create something a lot bigger than themselves and just enter this locked in focus, I'm gonna make it mode. And I found myself to be really inspired by her story and also to find so many parallels within our journeys. And the more that I learned about Mari, the more that I realized we had very similar upbringings. We had really similar experiences in our homes, having a parent that struggled a lot with mental illness and just with our relationship with them, that formative mother experience and how much that played a role in some of our own struggles with our worth and our body image and how we treated our bodies and looking to food and even substances as a coping mechanism and how we sort of got out of that and began to mother ourselves and learn to be comfortable with ourselves and give ourselves that love that we didn't feel like we received. And obviously she and I both started companies around the same time and put our journeys out there and, somehow decided to put ourselves out there in a really scary world in a new way. And I thought that was interesting. And yeah, we had so many parallels that I wanted to dig into, I guess, our psychology. What is it about that chaos in the home, childhood trauma to hyper vigilant, hyper productive entrepreneur pipeline? And are we actually better off today? Or are we still in a bit of an extreme where we're now looking to work and rigid routines and success and making an impact in the world to still find that identity that we maybe didn't feel in childhood? So I guess that was sort of my question that I wanted to ask at the end of this episode is are we really better off now? And I think ultimately the answer is yes, but I think we're still very much on a journey where we're still figuring out who we really are and who our identity is, even beyond this polar opposite identity that we created when we pulled ourselves out of the trenches and decided to turn our lives around. So we talk a lot about that journey start to finish. We talk about our rock bottom moments, kind of coping with substances, coping with codependent relationships, learning how to spend time alone and actually be comfortable being alone, and how that's still a never-ending journey for us right now, and kind of tips that we have. We talk about how sometimes you need to be a little bit strict with your routines or even a little bit tough on yourself when you're first starting to make a change, but how that coping mechanism can also start to expire and eventually you need a new one that's more compassionate to get you to even the next level, and how hard it is to learn that compassionate voice and kind of be a little bit easy with yourself and trust yourself that you are going to maintain the changes and maintain stepping into this new identity that you've worked so hard to create, and how to let go of some of that control that can come with trying to do better. We talk a lot about self-worth and self-esteem and those mindset shifts I mentioned that she experienced, going from all of these kind of self-harming behaviors to waking up one day and being like, wait, I'm worth taking care of. How someone can start to even build that. And it was nice to just be so candid with someone who, again, has a really similar journey. And I think we understand each other in an interesting way. And I think a lot of you will connect with our childhood experience and just kind of the things that we share that we still struggle with in this episode. So this is a nice one. It's always nice to have a human conversation versus always being the student and having to like sit there, take notes, learn. It's nice to just be able to get lost in someone's story and their journey and kind of see yourself in it and be able to steep in their wisdom and insights, and to see the behind the scenes of someone who you see online in one way, but also know, oh wait, they're a human and they're struggling just like I am with some of the exact same things. So I hope you love this candid episode here. And thank you as always for listening each week and for spending this time with me and for choosing to listen to What's the Juice. It means the world to me and I really appreciate you guys. Enjoy. Okay, are you ready?
We feel each other's emotions.
It's everything. It's living my life intentionally.
That's the message, right?
Absolutely. There's no difference between our mental health and our physical health. It's the same exact thing.
And without further ado, let's get juicy.
Mari Llewellyn, welcome to What's the Juice podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored.
We just had such a good conversation on your show, and we've broken the seal of going deep. So.
Oh, I know. I'm giddy from that conversation. I'm actually giddy right now.
You know, I want to set the stage for this episode, and I have like my little spiel written out, because I think that there are several ways that society would introduce the Mari that I have sitting in front of me, right? A successful entrepreneur who owns a multi-million-dollar business, a hyper-successful business. You've created an empire. It's amazing. A fitness influencer with X amount of followers, the girl who lost 90 pounds, and any other number of like these labels that are tied to the things that you've done, but not necessarily who you are. Mm. And what interests me so much about you is who you are, because I think that there's so much complexity within you that you're starting to share in like really beautiful ways through your podcast. But I think that like these boxes of identity that people put us in and that we also strive for, thinking that like we'll try them on and they'll fit and then we'll be good, can actually like turn into prisons in a sense over time when we realize that they just don't feel like home. Mm. And so I want to get to know the human, the Mari underneath, who in my eyes is on this really beautiful journey of self-discovery. And I just want to hear about your story.
I've never been introduced that way ever. And thank you for phrasing it like that. I mean, I have become known as these various boxes, as you mentioned, and we talked a lot about the gray area on my show. And that really is relevant for me. I feel like I have been associated with the weight loss, the company, these sort of external things, which has in turn confused me along the way. And I've been on a whole identity journey. I feel like I'm getting closer and closer and closer to finding out who I really am, but it is forever evolving and I'm still not 100% all the way there, but I am getting closer and that's all I can ask for. So yeah, thank you.
And you're sharing that journey, which I think is so important because you become a mirror to those watching, even to myself, who are also like in various stages of the void. You know, I think we go through these periods of darkness and rebirth and who the heck am I? And oh my God, this identity that I've built my life around suddenly doesn't fit anymore or is changing, or I'm like feeling like I'm outgrowing things, but it's so painful to even think about that. And it's just nice to have a space to talk about it. So I want to kind of like introduce my first question by telling you, I've been really like listening to you intently. I've listened to your solos. I've learned about your story. And you and I were saying that we have such oddly similar stories.
Like weird.
It's scary. So I wrote down the similarities.
Okay.
We both grew up in chaotic home environments, as we would call them, right?
Yeah.
And from what I've heard you talk about, I know that you don't go into detail, and I also try to not go into super detail either, but just on a high level, we had moms who were struggling with mental illness. Mm-hmm. And it felt a little bit, there was like an unstable sense of like, is this person okay? Like kind of this hypervigilance.
Yep.
And then we both lived in Westchester, New York.
914, baby.
Crazy.
So weird.
We both eventually went on to struggle massively with our own mental health. We both had really difficult rock bottom times in college. We like hit a wall and had to make a change. We both met our husbands or started dating our husbands during college and decided that that was our person. So we have this like insane level of commitment of like, once I'm in this, I'm in this.
Yeah.
We had our aha moment where we originally went on this health and eventually spiritual journey through like our weight, starting off fitness and nutrition. We both lost a significant amount of weight, and we both went on to start supplement companies. Okay.
I didn't even like put that part together. This is insane.
Like literally went on to start wellness supplement companies during like the wellness boom.
Yeah.
And we did so through the influencer route,
Yeah.
where it was like founder facing,
Yeah.
where we were the face of the brand. And we did so with our husbands as our right hand.
Your husband is your right hand?
Actually, once we got married, he left the company so that our relationship could be better.
Stop.
Mhm.
Oh, I want to ask you all about that too.
Really fascinating.
My husband's the CEO of Bloom.
It's like duality of all things. It's so necessary for periods of time, for seasons, for certain aspects, but sometimes that relationship can grow and change. And sometimes like what the company is even asking for is different.
Yeah.
And what your relationship is asking for is different. And like, it's okay for that to change. And it's given us a lot of space to bloom.
Period. Let's go.
So the last two similarities, I think, that during those years of building our businesses, we really zeroed in on work and like used work as like another drug.
Masculine vibes.
Yes. And then I also think that we are both now trying to come to a place of balance, which is what I want to talk about today.
Beautiful.
So my first question, what really sticks out to me and what we talked about in our episode on your show is that it seems like for both of us, like weight loss and fitness, or like this aesthetic way in, was ultimately how we entered our soul journey. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And outlining that was such a great thing to do because I knew in my head that we had a lot of overlap, but really seeing it, it's pretty incredible.
It's wild.
It's wild. And it's really nice to have someone to talk to because it's such an interesting journey to go through. And I don't think there's a lot of people out there who could relate. I mean, maybe there are listening.
You'd be surprised at the amount of hyper successful female entrepreneurs I know that have mom issues. It's a little bit of a parallel that I'm finding that I think like kind of made us so good at what we do because.
Yeah, I think of Krista.
Yup. Krista, I think of like some other friends in the industry, friends who have like skincare companies. I think when you grow up and like need to be hyper vigilant and attuned to pleasing somebody to stay safe, you kind of get really good at social media.
Facts. You get really good at because you want to be heard and seen in a way.
Yeah.
So like sharing and connecting feels so good. Even interviewing.
Yes.
Like interviewing people and having this connection and this full hour conversation with full eye contact.
Yeah.
Gives me a high.
Yes. I mean, presence is the ultimate drug. It is the ultimate human need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, the original question, my soul journey. I mean, I really love that you put it that way because to be real and transparent, the way that I got known was from a before and after photo.
Yeah.
Everyone loves a before and after photo. Acne before and after, body before and after. This was the photo that really launched my social media career. It was what made people follow me. It was what made me get attention. I think there's some level of PTSD from that in a way and being known as that because I don't personally, it's not a big part of my life anymore. Like the weight loss happened for me so long ago that it doesn't feel recent to me. And going back into that mindset and trying to recall it's very hard for me. And I also have a hard time connecting with the old version of myself. It's something I work on in therapy is really bridging the gap between new Mari and old Mari. Because when I even speak about old Mari, it's as if it's not me.
Yeah.
And I think that honestly helps me maybe wrap my head around some of the things I've been through. But fitness and that period of my life was by far the most transformative thing that I've ever been through. I didn't know who I was before fitness. And I think it took hitting a rock bottom and really just having this moment of I need to do something to realize that I had basically done nothing. And that's a really harsh way of putting it. But coming out of a chaotic household, throwing myself in anger, really, of being angry of the way that I grew up, into college, using alcohol, using boys, using self-harm, like really anything I could get my hands on to numb how I felt, just became this like black hole. And that was the time where I was diagnosed with BPD, where I was put on medication, no knowledge of how health could ever improve my mental being. And I remember my dad telling me about a book called like Food is like You Are What You Eat or something. I forget the name of the book. And I was so angry. I was like, how could you possibly think that food would help me? This is such a deeper issue. And it was like, given it was. And I felt a little bit invalidated. Lo and behold, food changed my whole life, truthfully. Like just making some different choices put me on a better foot. I think we talked about that in our episode as well. Just small things that made me feel better every day were the starting point to be able to do the bigger stuff. So yeah, I very much think that fitness taught me everything about myself. I did self-isolate a lot. I think the relationship that really was strengthened during that time was mine with Greg's, my now husband. We had been like on and off in college. And he supported me through it in a way that was so incredible and really, instilled in me that I could do hard things. I think doing hard things was something that I needed. I needed to prove to myself that I could keep my own promises and show up every day. And everything I learned during that time about myself has carried me into everything I've done ever since. And I keep learning more and more about myself. But that period of time was by far the most needed and transformative thing I've ever been through.
Do you think that it's a little hard and can get like sticky because this was my experience. I didn't feel seen growing up. And then my now husband was like the first person who saw me and also ushered me through like the you're worthy kind of stage of like I was at that rock bottom and he was like, no, you got this, same way that Greg did for you. And then they almost like act as like this parent that you never had. They're like the first person that gives you that unconditional love.
Yeah.
And it kind of like, I felt that I kind of went too far into, I got like a little codependent there, a little bit sticky in that relationship because I was just so addicted to the love.
Yeah.
Was that also your experience?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think it's difficult to say that in the moment because you're just like, what do you mean? Like, this is my person. Like, they're helping me. It feels healthy. But I for sure went through periods of time of codependency with Greg. I mean, he was my best friend, boyfriend. I cut out a lot of my friends at the time because it was very much, they were my drinking friends, my party friends, cut them out. Greg was really the only person that I had. I was terrified of not being with him, terrified of losing him. And being with someone for 10 plus years, you constantly have to check in if I'm being too codependent. I think right now is the most independent I've ever felt being with Greg. And it's taken a lot of self-discovery, finding my own passions, finding horses for me was a huge healing in so many ways. And learning that I can love things without him.
Which sounds so normal to other people.
I know.
But for us is like,
I know.
Oh, it's like safe to do things on my own. Like it just doesn't, when the world just doesn't feel safe to you growing up, it is very hard to like, and when you feel so, are you an only child?
No, I have a sister, but we're not that close.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, as an only child, that was also kind of like, that played into my thing of like, I just felt so alone in the world, period. So as soon as I had someone, I'm like, let me latch on because this finally feels good. But like, I, like you, kind of just discovered my own hobbies in the last few years because I would almost at first, because I had such an abandonment thing, like when Nick would go to do his hobbies or like spend time like working on his car, I would almost get like triggered.
Yep.
That was like my hardest thing to practice being alone. How did you start to get comfortable with that? Like, did you dose it?
When I met Fee started working with me about 3 years ago. I couldn't go to the grocery store without him.
Wow.
Yeah, it was that bad.
Huh.
Just to be real with everyone, like that was what it looked like for me. And I'm talking to you, I'm realizing that probably stems from childhood. And I've heard you say on your interview with Krista, lonely is the word that you would define when thinking about your childhood. And I feel very similarly. I had a sister, but it was a very lonely existence. And I feel like that fear does creep in for me. I think getting comfortable being alone takes baby bites. Just like we were talking about with fitness, like it takes little things like that feeling when I went to the grocery store for the first time by myself and it was okay. Yeah. Or, being at home for a couple hours by myself and it being okay. that evolved over time to me taking a weekend trip by myself so I could go horseback riding and not having, because what ends up happening is when you rely too much on someone, the resentment builds. It's like, oh, I'm not doing the things I want to do because of you. It's not because of him. It's because of me. It's because of my insecurities. So that was a big realization for me as well. And I'm so grateful that I've done that work because I get so much joy out of doing things on my own now. Still, like, I don't want to say I'm fully healed. Like, I still have some codependency there. But I'm grateful I started when I did, because now when he travels a lot for work now. He's pitching retailers in Michigan and Seattle. He's always traveling. It's tough for me to sleep alone. I think sleeping is probably the hardest thing. But I'm getting better and better.
That's incredible. And I think even just your self-awareness around it that's one thing I've always noticed about you. And I mentioned to you earlier, it takes a certain type of hard work to cultivate a level of self-awareness, to think about the way that you think, to think about your behavior and not just behave.
Yeah.
It's interesting because a lot of times, like, I think when I was kind of in the depths of this, I was like, okay, I'm lashing out on my partner. And afterwards, I would just have the tiny self-awareness of that didn't feel good. I feel icky. And then as I started to cultivate more and more self-awareness and maybe like my consciousness opened a little bit more, I was like, oh, okay, why am I lashing out? I felt in the moment before I did this. And then the next time it was like, when I felt that in the moment before I lashed out, I can feel that that's coming from this in my childhood. And it's a process of expansion. How did you start to cultivate self-awareness of your own behavior?
I remember talking a lot about it with my therapist. I love my therapist. I've been in therapy since I was 14. I was put in therapy for ADD, which I'm not even sure that I have ADD, to be honest with you. I think it was because my parents were about to divorce and they were like, oh, let's put her in therapy.
Yeah.
But my recent therapist, I remember coming to her and saying, oh, I noticed, when I was self-harming back then, that I felt this way beforehand, or I noticed that I behave this way when this person talks to me like this. And she was like, oh, I would call that your observer. And she kind of phrased it as this person looking down on the situation rather than being in my own head. And that really stuck with me. And I feel like whenever I tend to dissociate, like that's my go-to coping mechanism of choice. Whenever I feel like I'm dissociating or acting in a way where I'm not, having that awareness, I think about that observation and having like a bird's eye view on what's going on. It can be really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And you can kind of tell when you're coming from a place of like anxiety, panic, fear, dissociation, because it just feels different than when you're truly in your own body and speaking do you know what I'm saying?
I do. It sounds like this is parts work. And it sounds like the observer is like the capital S self, the true highest self. And that true self is observing the parts, like the firefighter who like lashes out when they feel wounded to try to protect, or like the manager who overworks and overschedules when we know that it would be too painful to feel our feelings otherwise.
Yep. So my therapist just had me label all the different parts of myself. Where do you get all of this verbiage from?
My therapist, also just like looking into parts work and IFS.
Parts work. Okay.
It's called parts work. It's called internal family systems. Krista talks a lot about this. There's books about this. And I think I've just kind of made it my own because of my sort of obsession with the mother relationship. Yeah. I think I've started to look at my parts in this like mother dynamic of, okay, sometimes my inner child is running the show. Sometimes my inner teenager, my inner rebel, my inner momager, who's not really a motherly mom, but like a managing mom is running the show. And really my inner mother needs to come in, which would also be like the capital S self, and identify which parts are piping up and which kids are crying and like give them that love, that regulation, but also that discipline if needed.
Yep.
So I think so much of like this work that we're doing ends up being that, just in other language.
Totally. It's helpful too to think about it in parts, because when you have mixed feelings about something, it's like, oh, I'm feeling shameful about this, but also it's what I want to do. And my therapist is like, okay, well, which part of you feels shame? It's like, well, the controlling part feels shame for wanting to go out and drink tonight, or wanting to go out and like be with friends. But the true self wants to go. Like, I do want to go and do that. And I know I have the control to do it in a healthy way. But the controlling piece is the piece that I'm always fighting with.
It's so funny that you say that, because I've recently been talking to that controlling part of myself, because I think that is my ultimate underlying dynamic, or like my ultimate driver, I guess.
Yeah.
That was a response to a lack of safety, is like this need to control. And I want to talk to you about this dynamic of extremes in control that I know that you've experienced. Because over the last like 2-ish years, let's say, I've seen you go on this journey very similar to myself, where you flip the script from the negative extremes of your childhood expressing through like being totally out of control, which can still be a form of trying to control.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, I'm actively choosing to be totally out of control. So I'm still in the driver's seat. I'm still controlling.
Yes.
And that's like the self-harm that you mentioned, the drinking, unstable relationships. And then I think both of us went down this path of the perceived positive opposite to that extreme, which is like hyper productivity, extreme drive towards success, rigid routines, and like control, where we're like, well, now I can have control, but it's like, can we actually?
So good. I remember reading a narcissistic mother book, and it was about the different ways a child can come out. And it was very black and white. But one way was the crazy, off the walls, does whatever they wants to get attention type of vibe. And then the other one was the hyper productive. I was like, that's weird, because I feel like I've been both. Have I transformed? Have I done both? You know, because I always kind of thought my sister was one way and I was the other way.
Yeah.
But as you said, very much went through a period of time where I was proud of the fact that I was crazy. And like everyone came to me if they wanted to drink. And, you know, I was the one that was willing to do whatever. And then I fully went into control, obsessive, whether it was about work ethic was a huge thing for me. Like couldn't say no to any opportunity, glued myself to a desk, like truly obsessed with being busy. And that's something I'm really looking at right now. My schedule has changed a lot since moving from LA to Austin. And now I think also obsession with my skin, my lab tests, like optimizing absolutely everything in my life because it just fills a void.
Yep.
And accepting the fact that I can't actually control everything is, it feels uncomfortable.
Sometimes we have this underlying feeling of like anxiety or like something's not right, I'm in pain. And sometimes it's easier to have a thing that we can name to channel that anxiety and rumination and obsession towards instead of actually seeing the thing that's hurting and in pain. And when it's acne, right? It's like, well, yeah, of course I'm anxious, or of course I'm like being obsessive because it's like this anxiety and blah, blah, blah. And it gets channeled there, but it's really coming from a deeper place. And I think any of these outlets on both sides of the extreme, whether it was the drinking or the partying, or it's the workaholism, these are all ways of, at the end of the day, avoiding the relationship with ourselves and the relationship with our pain.
Yeah.
And that is the hardest place to be. It's the hardest place to live. It's so hard to build that capacity.
Yeah.
Have you started to kind of have awareness around that as well? This like need to avoid pain?
100%. Like even with small things, I've now been deleting social media every weekend because I was finding I was using the phone as a way of distracting and tapping into other people's lives as a way of distracting.
Yep.
And it was making me question my own life. I would have like the perfect Saturday, like my dream Saturday with my horses. Maybe I'm cooking. And then I would go on social media and see people socializing and they're all together. And then it would trigger my loneliness feeling and being left out. And all of a sudden I'm questioning what I know to be what I want to do. And it's like, what? So being aware of that, I think I am someone who really gravitates towards distracting myself and numbing it out the pain. And I'm still learning what it looks like to sit in it. Even if it's just, okay, for example, I got acupuncture done yesterday. Getting acupuncture done is really boring, in my opinion. Like you just lay there for 45 minutes with needles in you.
Yeah.
And I was I literally started playing a podcast, like the Toast podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm 10 minutes in and I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Like I'm listening to like pop culture and distracting myself when this is such a moment where I should be with myself. And I turned it off. Just little things like that. I know it sounds silly.
It's not silly.
But as you were saying with the lip liner this morning, like that for me was a big moment because I was like, I'm choosing to be with myself right now.
Yeah. You know, as you say that, I'm thinking the way in, I'm always looking to give people a way in. Like, how can one person find a way that works for them to start building that muscle of practicing being comfortable being alone with their own thoughts? And I think because I had so much actual dysregulation within my physical body due to my extreme nervous system dysregulation, I think because like we just literally that safety extended to our physical bodies. One of the only things that ever like kind of made me feel safe was touch. Not touch from most people. I don't really love to be touched, but like massage, for example. I found that, okay, when I'm getting a massage, there's just something like the pressure. The pressure was really, really calming to that fight or flight response. And so in the beginning of all this, when I first started to practice being alone with myself, I would go and get massages once a month because I found that that was the only time that I could be comfortable actually just sitting there for an hour without my phone with my own thoughts because the touch was regulating me.
Yeah.
And making those thoughts feel less scary. I don't know. It's just, but it is really hard.
Massages took me, it's funny that you say that because it took me a long time to be comfortable with them because I'm so afraid of people touching me. I don't know why. I don't know where that comes from. I mean, we could theorize, but massages now for me are a lot more enjoyable. And I feel like that I didn't grow up in an affectionate household.
Yeah.
Didn't touch each other, didn't say I love you, still don't say it. But me as like who I am now, that's very important to me. Like I want to cultivate a household where I hug my kids, kiss my kids, say I love you all the time. And I didn't have that. But it's weird because I want that, but I'm still not fully there. So little things like massages or forcing myself to say I love you to people when it doesn't feel quite comfortable for me, but like that's what I want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I think at our core, we want intimacy more than anything else. We just don't know how to do it in right relationship. It's like it's just been twisted for us. You know, you sound to me like an overstimulated introvert. Like in the most I see you, I recognize you, I am you way.
Can you explain what that means?
Like the whole, I don't love a lot of touch and like massage doesn't feel good to me. Like that's someone who at baseline, you know, even the ADHD thing, there's like ADHD, right? When like there's a little bit of autism and ADHD and everything's a spectrum, right? But oftentimes folks with that neurodivergence have this extreme, like sensory overload. Like there's just a lot of sensory going on.
I'm like that with sound.
Same. Like that with sound, like that with everything. I have to like sleep a certain way. Like I'm sensory sensitive.
Same.
And I've always been like that. My mom was always like that. My mom, I think, like was perhaps on the autism spectrum. And I think that that was part of her like mismanaged mental health. And I think that there just wasn't that framework for like women with neurodivergence back then. And it's interesting like how those traits are kind of within me as well. And I just think that we are just sensitive, introverted women. And yet we went so far the other way to be like, look, world, I'm normal, that we became influencers.
Yeah. Yeah, on a platform.
Where, and it's funny because like my friend Michelle, who like really deeply sees me, is like, people don't know you're weird. They're like, you know, she's like, I see your Instagram and what people like think you are and like how you kind of portray yourself. That's not you. Like you're a weirdo and it's a great thing.
I mean this in the nicest way. Like you are so smart and you recall information so quickly and you're so knowledgeable. You had to have been weird at some point.
I'm a weirdo.
Deep, dark weirdo.
And I'm trying to get the weird back. That's why I'm wearing like a weird polo and like yellow shoes.
I'm obsessed. I think I'm a weirdo as well.
I think you are. And I think that's where you're saying this weekend thing where like you had the weekend that was true to you.
Yeah.
But then you went on social media and you saw everybody else doing their weekend and then you had the FOMO. There's because of your history with BPD and from what I know about BPD, there's this like lack of identity, this kind of unstable sense of identity of who am I, who are you? And I think that's what makes the BPD dynamic extra susceptible to codependency, because when you don't know who am I, who are you, where do I end and you begin, just so easy to get enmeshed.
100%.
And so I think that there's this element of like, it's even harder for those of us with an unstable sense of identity to know and feel good about this is who I am.
Yeah.
Because this is who I am also means this is who I'm not. And this is who I'm for also means this is who I'm not for. And it's interesting how we went the extreme way of like, no, but I'm going to prove that I'm for everyone by like being an influencer and catering to being like likes, right?
No, 100%. 100%. And it brought me some success.
Yeah.
For sure. Like it was helpful. But at the same time, like at my core, now since moving to Austin, I feel like I'm really trying to tap into what actually feels good for me. I'm posting so much less. Like I really don't share nearly as much. If I do share, it's on the podcast because I feel like this is the place where I can practice being myself.
Dude.
Do you know what I'm saying?
It's literally a parallel journey. It's kind of weird. I think that where it's like a Freaky Friday thing happening.
I love it. No, it's really peculiar.
I wonder what is ahead for you in owning weird Mari.
I know. So do you want to hear like a couple of the things I've been doing?
Yes.
For example, like the chickens. I just got 7 chickens purely because when I think about who I am as a person, I try to go back to like childhood me at like the purest form before I felt influenced by my parents or shit going on in my household. Obsessed with animals. I've always been obsessed with animals. And I think it's like a trauma thing. They make me feel so good. Like I feel like they see me. Yeah. So getting my horse and the horseback riding, when I'm doing that, I feel like myself. I show up with no makeup on, regardless of acne. I'm not looking in the fucking mirror. I very rarely am filming. I'm doing whatever I want, right? There's other like weird horse girls that I'm friends with and we talk about weird horse things. Like I'm fully in a horse club. The chickens for me, everyone's like, you don't eat eggs. It's not about the eggs, okay? It's not about the eggs. Like this for me is a childhood dream. Like I go into my little chicken coop and I pick them up and I feed them by hand and I have my little mealworms. I'm out there in weird outfits. I just feel like, I don't know. It feels really, you can tell when you're doing something that's you actually want to be doing, you know?
I mean, your Welsh ancestors were probably doing that. They were probably making their own brooms and sweeping up outside and
they're
touching
rolling in
chickens.
their grave right now. They're like, yes.
That's the thing. And this is like this journey back to the self is what I was saying earlier on your show. It's so much this journey back to our ancestry and being okay with like using our lineage, our ancestry, our ancestral activities as a way to reconnect with who we really are and unplug from who we are when we're plugged into the world. Because you're like this wonderful, sweet inner child who wants to play with chickens, and you were cosplaying in Venice as like a businesswoman who has a 12-hour-a-day calendar. Not that you can't be multiple things at once, but it seems like, you know, even as an introvert, right? It seems like your weekends are really happily spent in nature with maybe like one-on-one connection with a girlfriend who has horses, or maybe like, that's how introverts are. They like one-on-one connection. They don't like groups and performing, and then we became influencers.
I don't love a group.
No, and that's very introverted of you. Yeah. And yet you've been trying to put yourself in a box of like, but everyone else is socializing, but this is the social norm, but I have to do this. And no wonder you're in pain. Like,
that was what I felt in LA. I felt this underlying frustration. It's like, I'm doing all the right things. I'm going to the Pilates classes with my friends. I'm going to Air One. I'm doing all the LA shit and it doesn't feel good. Like, I felt trapped. And yeah, the one-on-one walks around the lake with girlfriends. Like, I love connecting. I truly do. I think it's a really important part of my life. My husband, honestly, even though he is louder than me and maybe a little more extroverted, is way more antisocial. Does that make sense? Like he really thrives being alone. I need to connect with like one person a day.
Yeah. Is there a sense of grief in the when I know who I am and who I am for, I also am clear on who I'm not for?
Yeah, I have a hard time with that because I still have the anxiety of like wanting to be liked by everyone and setting a boundary even and knowing like, hey, I actually don't go out past 9 p.m. or I have to work out at this time, or Like that's not an activity I would enjoy. I'm so afraid of rejection and not being liked. I feel like I'm not fully there yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think just by showing up as myself every day and showing people what I like to do is helping, honestly. Like being open about what I enjoy and not being afraid of it being perceived as weird is helpful.
Yeah.
But still the fear of rejection's there for sure. Even, I mean, the whole family thing is a whole other layer. I have a hard time showing up as my true self with them.
It is. That actually to me is the greatest spiritual test.
Yeah.
One time I have this woman who's like, she's a lymphatic therapist, but not like a, I'm going to snatch you lymphatic. It's like, I'm going to gently pump your clavicles and like talk to your organs lymphatic. She's like an intuitive. And she was like, she's like reading my body. She like channels messages, whatever. And she's like, you are putting this wall between like your village and like your dad's village, for example. And yet you're actually living in the same village. You're actually a lot more alike than you think you are. And if you can just show up to that village and knock down the wall as who you really are, you will give him more permission to express who he really is. And you will give yourself the freedom that you're looking for, that you think he's oppressing. You know, it's like,
whoa.
I think so much of like applying the spiritual journey is showing up as exactly as we are. And I actually think like exposure therapy almost has a role here.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about this like rejection sensitivity. There actually is something called rejection sensitive dysphoria that's like related to ADHD /
Haven't heard of it.
stuff. It's like it's an interesting little mechanism. But recently I had this thing happen where I posted a podcast episode with my friend Kat.
Okay.
And my friend Kat practices West African stick divination. Okay. She sits there, bangs sticks on the ground, talks to the earth element spirits, and gives you like rituals that you need to go do in nature to reconnect with nature and help align yourself to your path. Yeah.
Don't you need to climb a mountain?
No. You know, it's not. My rituals this time around, I just had a reading with her, were not that intense.
Okay.
But I did in that ritual. This was 3 years ago when I was still like I'm in a box more influencer Olivia. And now I think I'm showing slowly but surely like little more true pieces of myself, quite like you.
Yeah.
Especially through the podcast. I realized that short form content, it's not designed to actually be in relationship with your audience. It's designed to put you in a box and take you further away from relationship. Mm-hmm. So long form is my jam. But I posted her episode, and all this to say, I went to the mountain, by the way, because I was at an era, the elements said that I was about to show my new face to the world, my real face to the world. Oh. And this was before I had this whole like epiphany. I went through some crazy stuff after that. And I'm much happier now and I'm much truer to me now. But I had to go to the mountain, put mud on my face, and then wash it off and reveal my new face to the world and ask the mountain to hold me. And I posted some clips of her thing on my Instagram, and people went off.
What did they say?
Organic Olivia does witchcraft. Organic Olivia does this. Oh my God, I didn't think that West African witchcraft would be the reason I had to unfollow you. Like people went nuts.
No.
And that was always my biggest fear, being a public person.
Oh, yeah.
And as soon as my biggest fear happened, that people, like this was exposure therapy to the max, because it wasn't someone saying, Organic Olivia posted a bad study or is wrong about this. It was Organic Olivia does witchcraft, okay? It was an extreme.
Wow.
And facing that extreme, having that happen to me was the most freeing, healing thing ever, because I said, oh my God, it happened. Now I don't have to be perfect.
Wow.
And it shifted everything for me. I don't know. I just feel like I can be weird now.
Yeah. It's funny. I get a lot of shit on the internet. I mean, through the podcast, having various people on the show, a lot of controversial topics, I get a lot of shit. And I think I'm weirdly good at avoiding reading things about myself. I've never found myself on Reddit.
Oh no, you just can't.
Absolutely
What's the point?
not.
I would never.
God, I don't know why people ever go on there. You're not going to read nice things about yourself. I actually got my brain scanned by Dr. Amen, and I fully went into it being like, oh, I know I have BPD. I know I have negative thought patterns. I know I have whatever. It came back and he was like, you fully have like OCD. And it was a huge aha moment for me.
Wow, because that's the obsessive ruminating thoughts.
Yeah, I'm a very obsessive person. And I went back in my head and thought about my mum's patterns and her dad's. Very, very obsessive. And it was in a life-changing conversation I had with him because I had beliefs about myself that were not true.
I think I think so often people get misdiagnosed / like it can be confusing to diagnose because a personality disorder is not a like testable thing. It's kind of like there's no drug to treat it. We don't know the etiology. Like a little bit abstract.
BPD, being diagnosed with BPD and thinking that I had BPD, I have a lot of qualms with it because in one way it gave me a lot of relief and made me kind of self-reflect and feel more normal, quote unquote. But I don't meet the criteria for BPD anymore.
Yeah.
So I look back and at the time I was told you'll have it forever. There's no cure for it. You're born with it. None of those things were true. I think it's been said that it's a trauma-based disorder, which makes a lot more sense to me. It's kind of like a PTSD.
Yeah, it's a developmental like personality core.
Yeah. And to tell someone, oh, you're doomed for life, you're going to self-harm for life, you need to be on medication for life, I feel like that's harmful.
I think that it's like a yes and for many folks who don't have the tools, the access that we do, I think that there is a very good chance that they do need to be compliant with their medication in order to protect themselves.
So true. And I needed it at the time. I was a danger to myself at the time.
And if you are like somehow able in this world to get the right care and have the right spaces held for you and can do a lot of the work that you've done to walk back that trauma and to like, reduce a lot of that shame and find that identity and build that self-esteem, build that core self that is missing in BPD. I do think there is a massive world of progress and like management through those therapies, like DBT, right? Like DBT is amazing.
DBT was incredible for me. Yeah. And just to clarify, like, had I not had that diagnosis, I probably wouldn't have done all that work.
Yeah.
I did therapy. I did BPD. I did textbook work. I've done the eye movement therapy. I've done various things.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have done those had I not known. So
I just think it's so interesting that when Dr. Amen looked at your brain, he said OCD.
Yeah.
Because I switched to psychology as my major. That's why I'm like going off and so fascinated right now because I love psychology. And I think I went from pre-med to psych because I was like, let me figure out my mom. So it's like I know too much about personality disorders at this point for my own good. I also was always trying to figure out what I had. I was like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah.
And my mom and I used to literally take autism tests online to bond. That's why we would be like, yeah, I know. I actually found an old email that I sent her and I sent her like a link to BPD and I was like, interesting.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That's wild. You know, one of my deepest, I did a lot of research about my mum as well because our parents are of the generation who were never diagnosed and they're just sort of loose in the world doing whatever. And I still don't think she fully knows what's going on. But my biggest fear was like, do I have the same thing as her? For some reason, that was always the fear. I don't think that I do. I think quite differently to her. But like, yeah, I went down a spiral with that as well.
When you say she still hasn't been diagnosed and I don't think we'll ever really like know what's going on with her, that is what we were talking about in your episode of the issue with Western medicine being so black and white and wanting to be certain about everything because people cannot be put in boxes. And we can try to, and we can notice patterns and we can have clinical diagnostic criteria in the DSM. And we can say this person fits the picture of this disorder, but people change, people are dynamic, people grow and evolve when they're in the right conditions and relationships.
Yeah.
And I don't think that people can be narrowed into like, this is what's wrong with you in the framework that like the static framework that Western medicine provides, even though it can be helpful to get the right medication management. It's a yes and it's a duality thing.
You're so right about that. I mean, just me, for example, having a BPD diagnosis and now being more considered someone with OCD, I would have never have dreamed that I had OCD characteristics. I thought someone with OCD was incredibly clean and organized, and I'm neither of those things, you know?
Oh my God, I am like disgustingly unorganized. Our brains work in very well in other ways. Like we're very mentally organized and rigid in other ways, but not, we just sound a lot alike. And I think also sometimes like neurodivergence and mental health issues and like all of this can be a spectrum and can be very complex and can take years to diagnose properly. And at the end of the day, it's like, it is not always a forever thing for some people. And there's so much that you can do and that our mothers didn't have a chance to do. And that is like the most important thing. When I look at the way my mother's mental health was treated, by the time like she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and got really bad and we looked at all her medication, like she was on Zoloft, Abilify, different like Klonopin, Adderall, like all of these things at the same lorazepam, right? Like other like benzo type things.
Yeah.
She was on all of these medications at the same time because they just kept adding more and being like, well, you have these ADHD traits, so let's give you the Adderall. And okay, you have this. And it's even science, we don't fully know. And we're sometimes shooting in the dark.
I was on Abilify as well.
And it's very hard to put a human in a box and say, this will work for you forever.
Yeah.
Because it often doesn't. There's often like its point of diminishing returns.
100%. I was put on like 3 different things back then. And as I said, like did need medication. Did I need 3 things at once? Probably not.
Yeah.
It was to the point where I was like numb.
Yeah.
Had no sense of reality. Didn't care about anything. No highs or lows. Literally just, and I could not eat enough. I literally couldn't eat enough. It was insane. I had never been someone who was drawn to like incredibly unhealthy foods. Like I just didn't really think about food, honestly. The second I was on that medication, I was obsessed with insanely unhealthy foods.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Really changing like the gut-brain axis and probably the microbiome in ways that we don't know. And then I look at my mother getting Alzheimer's so young and how young she was put on SSRIs and all these different medications and cocktails and everything. And I just can't help but wonder, like, again, no free lunch, the trade-off. And again, if that's what helps that person, that's what prevents someone from committing suicide. If that's what like gives someone quality of life, take the years off later. That's fine. Like whatever it's going to cost, or maybe it won't have a cost for them. I don't know. I can't say that I know enough to say that, but I do wonder, you know, the ways in which we are kind of throwing the everything but the kitchen sink at things sometimes, if there are not these other downstream effects. And I also acknowledge that we live in a world where the people who actually need the root cause support for those things often just don't have the access to get it. And it sucks.
Have you talked to Max Lugavie?
Here and there, I avoid talking to him too much because that's like pain. Like the mom Alzheimer's stuff is just pain.
Yeah.
It's like, it's tough.
Yeah. I can't even imagine.
But no, I know that he also just released that documentary.
Yes. Small boxes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's kind of about the mismanagement of healthcare system leading into Alzheimer's. I'll never forget right before my mom. So she basically had early onset and like struggled for many years with like slow cognitive decline and would get a little bit worse each year. And then she got COVID in 2020 and was put on a ventilator for 3 weeks and just had like almost no like it's just her oxygen was so low. It was like in the 70s for a while, which can really cause some neuronal death and all these things. So when she came off the vent, she was alive, but it's like she's never been the same. And it just really accelerated her decline. And right before COVID, she and I and my dad and my husband went to an Alzheimer's walk. And it was like that was when she still had some, you know, like there was like a little bit of someone there. And we were walking and I was telling her, you know, Mom, I just wish that like someone would have seen you. I just wish that you could have gotten better care and that you weren't put on all of these things so young without like deeper therapy, soul care, like these methods that we have now, even EMDR, all of these advancements that we've made. I'm just so sorry that nobody saw you. Oh. And I just, that generation was kind of wrong. And I feel bad because they hurt us inadvertently. Yeah. But the compassion that I have is like so much greater than that.
Yeah. I'm so sorry you went through all of that. And I can see the passion that you have for what you do now. And I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. And, you know, your purpose is helping all the people listening and watching your content. And I think what you're doing is almost like paying it back and you're kind of making the world a better place because of it.
I hope so. I also feel like I don't have any of the answers because it's like things are so complex, but just having these conversations I think is really important. When I look at your journey and the strides that you've made and the mental tenacity and strength that it's taken to overcome not just like your physical health struggles, but this very clear like internal struggle and like familial mental health picture that's been going on. I see this strong self-worth piece and this mindset shift that you made against all odds.
Yeah.
And it's like you went from self-harm to I'm worth taking care of my body. You went from relying on external measures of validation or over-relying on your partner or whatever to this journey of being okay with being alone. What was this aha moment that gave you the mindset shift of I'm the only person that's going to save me?
Such a good question and something I should probably spend more time thinking about. I mean, step one was the rock bottom weight loss moment, you know, like being 250 pounds, coming off of a ton of medication, dropping out of school, not having a job, living with my dad. Like it was such a shameful feeling. And it sounds negative, but I needed that. Like I needed to have a reality check of like, look what you have done. Like, look what your life looks like. And I don't always go into full detail of what it was like, but it was pretty atrociously bad. And I said to you before the interview, like I was this close to going down a very bad path, you know, drugs, alcohol, like it was right there. And it would have been so easy for me to do that. I think a little piece of me kind of knew that I was meant to do more. You know, when you hear like celebrities say like, I knew I was going to be famous. I knew whatever. I felt like I always knew that I had a deeper purpose. I had like a little inkling that I could do something really, really cool. And I think that carried me. And for a little bit, for sure, I was motivated by fear of slipping backwards.
Yeah. And that serves us.
Yeah.
That time.
Yeah. I needed to have that masculine energy and be really intense. I would listen to like, I don't know if you know Andy Frisella, but he's the inventor of 75 Hard. I would listen to him on the stair step and he'd be like yelling and you're a piece of shit. Da, da, da. Like that was the type of content I would consume, to be honest. And I felt like I needed that at the time. It got me where I needed to go. I worked my butt off. I created a business. Yeah. Now I'm in this era of like, that mindset really isn't serving me anymore. And it's actually quite detrimental. I need to dig deeper. And even struggling with acne, having to dig past my appearance and really find love for things outside of the way I look. I didn't realize how much value I was putting on the way I looked. I mean, being the face of a brand, getting lean, like seeing abs, like that being important for my business, like that was really confusing for me. And maybe the people only care because I look like this.
Yeah.
And then suddenly having acne and feeling like it's completely ripped out from under me. That's been a whole new journey. And I feel like every time I go through these really challenging moments, I just dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And the self-love thing, I mean, it's constant. Like as we spoke about, have a pretty obsessive personality. And I find myself, you know, during the day doing skin checks, falling down a hole of researching my acne. And that can be negative as well. Like doing everything I can to obsess and fix. And lately I've just sort of been in this mindset of just sitting with it and accepting it. I've spoken about this before, but I'm doing dick therapy. And both
come again?
DICCC.
Okay.
And it's like a manifestation you say to yourself.
Okay.
So every time I start spiraling about how bad my skin is, I go, I direct, I instruct, I command, I compel, I code my skin to work perfectly and properly. And I know that it can.
Ooh.
Yeah. Dick therapy.
She is invoking the spirits with that one.
Sammy Clark taught me about it. And now ever since, because I am an obsessive person, I say it to myself like 15 times a day. Every time a negative thought comes up about my skin, I go to dick therapy. And I don't know if that's fully healthy, but it feels better than what I was doing before.
Well, I guess that's the steps that we sometimes have to take. Like how we said earlier, an addiction to, you know, drugs or alcohol, like an addiction to exercise is a lot better of a replacement. It's still not the answer because it's trading one extreme for the other. But there's certain times in our life where extremes serve us as training wheels to just break the system.
Yep. 100%.
And it sounds like that was the case for you. You're a person who kind of needs to trade things off until you can come to that place of balance.
Yeah. It's a constant like, okay, I really can't let go of this thought right now. So let's replace it. And then I am getting better at sitting by myself. Like in the acupuncture yesterday, that was a good step in the right direction for me. But it's not like I'm doing that all day, every day.
What do you think you would need, or what do you think little Mari, your inner child who didn't get so much of what she needed in childhood, would need to feel safe in that place of balance and not rely on extremes either way to control?
What would I need to not have the extremes on both sides? Actually, I decided in August, the whole month, I'm not recording a single pod, deleting social media for the entire month. I'm going to Jackson Hole. I'm just going to be in the Teton National Forest, riding horses and vibing. And I wonder if I will come out. I wonder if I will ever leave, because I think that that's truthfully like everything I've wanted for a really long time.
I'm really proud of you.
Thank you.
I think that's a big step to take. And to maybe people listening, they're like, is that really a big step to take? I'd love to go take a month off work, but this is just different. It's like going from workaholism, kind of like work being your identity, not being able to pull yourself away, feeling extreme guilt and shame when you're not working because you're like, well, I have this thing. If I step away for a second, I'm going to lose it. And I'm going to like completely, it is a very, it's a different kind of struggle, but it's a struggle nonetheless. And it's rough. And I've been there, and that's why I get it. And I think a lot of my self-discovery, self-awareness, the way that I think now and the way that I can be okay with whatever happens tomorrow, if my business fails or not, is it started with taking time off, taking time away from this identity I created.
Yep. And everything is fighting against me because it's a celebrated thing to work hard, and people on my team want me to keep going, and we're going to lose traction. And I have a ton of voices telling me not to do it. And remaining strong in my decision is my test right now, because it is tempting to want to please everyone around me and keep going. But I know that I need that month.
Yeah, I'm so curious to see what happens with your skin.
I know.
I'm so curious to just see if you write what you find, if you journal. I'm just so excited for you. I'm so excited that you're committing to take that space for yourself. And I really commend you. And yeah, solo travel, time off, all of these things really were therapeutic for me. And I'm just so happy. I could keep talking to you for hours. There's like 17 more pages.
Olivia wrote a book before she came here today.
We need to do a part 2.
I know. I want to do one with you on my show too.
Yeah, we'll do a part 2 for sure. But as of now, since we have to close, please tell us where we can find you.
Thank you, Olivia. This was such a beautiful conversation. I feel inspired. I feel refreshed. I feel like I'm on the right path after talking to you. They can find me, my podcast, at Pursuit of Wellness Podcast. My Instagram is at Mari Llewellyn, MARILLEWELLYN. They can shop Bloom Greens at bloomnew.com. I think that's everything.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wasn't that great?